So, let's talk about Napoleon. You know, the guy who conquered most of Europe. What could his biggest, most catastrophic mistake possibly teach us about leadership today? Well, as it turns out, a lot. We're going to dive into one of the most epic failures in all of military history, and you'll see how the very same fatal flaw that brought down an emperor is still toppling giants of industry, even now.
Okay, so picture this. It's June 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte, the undisputed master of Europe, is on the move. He leads his Grand Army into Russia. And when I say Grand Army, I mean it. This wasn't just some regular fighting force. We're talking over 500,000 soldiers. That's the largest European army ever put together at that point. It was meant to be this incredible show of force, just overwhelming power.
And here's what was left. Fast forward just 6 months, it's December, it's brutally cold, and what's left of that massive army staggers back home. Out of over 500,000 men, fewer than 20,000 made it. Think about that. It wasn't just a defeat, it was a near total annihilation. The scale of that loss is just, it's hard to even wrap your head around.
So the big question is, what went wrong? I mean, how does a certified military genius like Napoleon oversee a disaster of this magnitude? Now, sure, you hear about the brutal Russian winter, you hear about disease and supply lines stretched to the breaking point, and all of that is true. But what our source material argues is that those were just symptoms. The real cause, the root of it all, was a single fatal flaw in Napoleon's own leadership.
Right, let's dig into this. We're going to look at what historians now call Napoleon's greatest mistake. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some bad call on the battlefield. No, this was a decision so profoundly catastrophic that it cost him way more than just an army. It ended up costing him his power, his reputation, pretty much his entire empire.
So to really get it, we need to dissect this failure, look at its anatomy. And the root cause, you see, it wasn't a strategic mistake. It was a character flaw. It all boils down to one single word, a word you've probably heard a million times, but maybe haven't thought about just how devastating it can be. That word is hubris.
Now, hubris, it's not just being proud or a little arrogant. It's way more than that. It's an overconfidence so massive, so blinding, that you just can't see the giant flashing warning signs right in front of your face. It's that dangerous, toxic belief that you're special, that you're the exception to the rule, and that somehow the normal laws of reality, well, they just don't apply to you.
But here's the thing. Hubris doesn't just pop up out of thin air. The source material we're looking at lays it out perfectly. It shows that hubris is like a fire, and it's fed by 4 specific things. 4 sources that build on each other, creating this perfect storm of overconfidence that, well, almost always leads to total disaster.
And here they are. You could call them the 4 horsemen of hubris. First, you've got a personality that's kind of prone to narcissism. Then, you add a long series of incredible successes. On top of that, you have everyone around you telling you how great you are. And finally, you've got a history of breaking the rules and getting away with it. Let's take a quick look at how every single one of these played out with Napoleon.
Okay, first up, success. And Napoleon wasn't just successful, he was a rock star. I mean, look at this record before the Russian campaign. 35 wins and only 3 losses. That's insane. A record like that creates this dangerous feeling that you're invincible. His confidence, which was once his greatest strength, completely morphed into straight-up arrogance. He literally believed he could not lose.
And this quote, wow, it just says it all, doesn't it? He basically saw success, or fortune, as something that was owed to him. It wasn't about careful planning or hard work anymore. It was his destiny. He felt entitled to it. And that feeling of entitlement, that is a textbook symptom of hubris.
So what happens when you think you're invincible? You stop listening. His own top advisors, the guys he trusted most, they saw exactly what was coming. They told him straight up, invading Russia is a terrible idea. It's doomed to fail. And his response? He basically called them cowards. He dismissed their warnings because he genuinely believed that his will alone was enough to conquer anything.
Okay, so you might be thinking, this is a cool history lesson, but what does it have to do with me? Well, this isn't just some old story about a guy in a fancy hat, because this exact same pattern, it plays out over and over again today. Not on a frozen battlefield, but in the modern boardroom. It's the story of the modern corporate emperor. And our source material draws a perfectly straight line from Napoleon's hubris to the hubris we see in some modern executives. The parallel is uncanny. Think about those huge, overpriced corporate takeovers that make no sense. That's often a CEO who is so convinced of their own genius that they completely ignore all the data, all the warnings from their team. And believe me, the financial losses can be just as staggering as the human ones. I mean, take a look at this example from the source. Novell's CEO completely ignored obvious market signals and bought WordPerfect for a whopping $1.4 billion. Less than 2 years later, they had to sell it for just $124 million. That's not just a loss, that's setting more than $1 billion on fire, a loss of over 90%.
You see, the parallels they're undeniable. It doesn't matter if you're talking about Napoleon's need for glory or a modern executive's pursuit of power. It doesn't matter if it's winning battles or hitting quarterly targets, praise from the French press or praise from the financial media. It's the same four drivers. The same recipe for disaster applies to emperors and executives alike.
Okay, so if this pattern is so obvious and the results are so catastrophic, what do we do about it? How do you stop it from happening? Well, let's talk about some ways to guard against this epic fall.
All right, for individual leaders, the source gives us some really clear, actionable steps. Step 1 is about reflection. It's simple. Own your failures, but give the credit for successes to your team. Step 2, you have to actually listen to the people who disagree with you. Go find the naysayers. They're the ones who will save you from groupthink. And finally, step 3, you need to appoint what they call an alter ego. That's a trusted person who is empowered to tell you the hard truth, the unvarnished truth, without ever fearing they'll get in trouble for it.
And it's not just up to the leader. The whole organization has a role to play. It's about creating systems that keep any one person's ego in check. So, you need a board of directors that's actually paying attention. You need a company culture where people are encouraged to disagree, to challenge ideas. And you absolutely need diverse teams, because when you have people from different backgrounds, they're naturally going to challenge each other's assumptions. It's the ultimate weapon against groupthink.
When you boil it all down, it really comes back to this one core idea. It's about being humble enough to know that you don't have all the answers. You just don't. And that listening to the people around you is absolutely vital. The ultimate antidote to hubris isn't complicated. It's humility. It's understanding that no leader ever succeeds alone, and that listening isn't a weakness. It's one of your greatest strengths.
Look, the story of Napoleon, it's so much more than just a history lesson. It's a timeless warning. It's a reminder for all of us to be on the lookout for that super fine line between healthy confidence, the kind that helps you succeed, and that catastrophic arrogance of hubris, the kind that guarantees you'll fail. So it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which leaders today do you see walking that line?